Once again, my name is Cuba Houghton. I work at a great institution from Kenya called Bajeti Hub, and there's flyers on your chair. You should be able to get some more information about what we do, but we're passionate primarily around citizen engagement in public finances. And one of the things that we do focus on, we have been focusing on for the past 10 years, has been public debt management and how to get citizens and institutions engaging more effectively around public debt. The theme of today's session is Beyond Reparations, and we'll be focusing a lot about some research that has been done, some of the softer, kind of more fundamental levers for public debt management and domestic accountability. But before I get much into the agenda, I'll request Alexander Rithi from the Institute of Social Accountability, who we are co-hosting this session with, to come and give some brief opening remarks, and then we'll get right into the session. Thank you.
This session is a very good session for us in this AFCOD, because we are looking at what there is beyond reparations. And our focus here is to look at accountability, domestic accountability. And this emanates from some work that we've been doing within Kenya. Some of you may be aware that Kenya, like many other African countries, is currently in a debt distress. It is among the 22 or 26 countries that were mentioned yesterday, whichever statistics you want to take. And a short while ago, in November of last year, our government requested for what is called a governance and corruption diagnostic review to be done for Kenya. And that process has been ongoing, where the IMF has been coordinating that work. But as civil society organizations at the Okoa Uchumi campaign, we felt there was need for us to prepare a people's governance diagnostic, where we go beyond the numbers, the huge numbers and complex issues that the IMF process will do, and we focus on the realities by the Kenyans. What are they feeling? What has debt done to them? What the increase in taxes, what is it doing to them? And the governance and corruption diagnostic is looking at what we call macrocritical structural deficiencies that we have in our country that are leading to leakages, and these leakages are leading to excessive government expenditure, which eventually leads to debt acquisition, and that is also coupled with misuse of both what is acquired through debt and also what is collected locally. So that has brought us up here, and what we have done, we have gathered a lot of insights from what happened in the Sri Lanka situation, where in Sri Lanka the civil society organizations also went and did the alternative governance and corruption diagnostics. And those are some of the things that we want to share in this particular session, because we are not sure how many other countries in Africa are going to follow the path that we have followed as Kenya. Because one of the things that you need to be aware of, when the government went and requested the IMF to conduct the governance and corruption diagnostic, we expected that there are some reforms that the government wants to undertake. What shocked us is in March of this year, actually the government pulled out of the 9th review of the IMF program that we are in. And we expected that we are not going to see any more of the IMF program. But as we proceeded to the Springs meetings, the government again wrote to the IMF requesting to be onboarded to another program. That process is yet to take off. In our view, we think that was just a front for them to show that we are doing okay. Even the GCD itself, in our view, was just a front for the government to show that we are doing fine, which was supposed to help them get into other board markets. And right now we are seeing ourselves going into the UAEs, into the Panda board market. I think we've also heard of Samurai board market. And Kenya being where it is now, and being one of the economic superpowers around Africa, many other African countries, especially in our region, are likely to follow suit. We've also seen, and I was discussing this yesterday with colleagues, we've also seen a new way of acquiring debt, where now we are doing something called securitization of our revenue streams. So these are giving us mixed reactions as to the responses that we expect from our government. And we are of the view that if we were to do well in terms of our accountability domestically, even some of the debts that we are acquiring, we don't need them. We have another phenomenon that is important for us to note, where domestic debt in Kenya has overtaken external debt. And this is likely to happen in any other African country. So these are macro critical issues. And for us, what we are doing, we want to go back in time and check where did the rain start beating us. And we are going as far back as the 70s to check how we've been managing our finances, how we've acquired debt, how the political actors have been doing politics and also involving themselves in the management of the economy in terms of their investments and so on. And we are doing a whole study coming from the 70s all the way to where we are today. And the reason is, when we look at the domestic debt, it has a lot to do with politically exposed persons and how they control the economy in our part of the world. And we know we are not alone, because we've seen what has happened in other countries. South Africa is a good case, where we have had strong families that are politically connected, controlling aspects of the economy. And this is not new in Africa. So we hope that this session is going to help us discuss some of those issues, and then we see whether we can come up with possible solutions to the problems that face not only Kenya, but all the countries in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. A round of applause for Alex, please. So thank you once again. For those joining this session, my name is Cuba. I'm the moderator. I'm from Bajeti Hub, which is an organization in Kenya working alongside TISA and a number of organizations represented in the room. So as we get into today's discussion, as you can see, the theme is beyond reparation, and a central question that we shall be asking ourselves today is, what kind of Africa do we need to be to go beyond reparations? And as I was preparing for this session, I remembered a story that my father used to tell me when I was in high school and I'd be on holiday. And it was a story about slaves on the day that slavery was abolished. And I think it's very relevant to today's discussion. And he used to ask me, what kind of slave do you want to be? So imagine you're a slave in, let's say in America, and it's the end of the 1800s, and you're informed that slavery has been abolished. You've been experiencing exploitation, you've been toiling the lands, there's been murder, rape, all of these different forms of injustice. And you've just been informed that you are now free. And in reality, what happened is that some slaves went on to pursue education, former slaves now. Some went on to be farm owners, business owners. Some even moved from America to other countries to free other slaves and to participate in the freeing of other slaves. So I thought it was relevant to discussion, because even as we talk about reparations and the different sorts of freedom that we want Africa to experience, what kind of Africa should we be? Do we need to be? What does Africa need to look like on the day that we are free? The day that reparations actually perhaps succeed? And so some of the questions we'll be grappling with is, how do we need to think about our politics? How do we need to think about our governance in actually securing the progress in debt reforms, as well as economic prosperity that have already been made, and matching them with our expectations? And so this conversation will be an internal reflection. It'll be a look at the things that we can do, a reflection on the messy but often foundational levers that African nations can leverage in order to deal with our debt crisis and achieve some sort of freedom and prosperity. The second point I wanted to make is, before we begin, is that you'll hear a lot about Kenya and Ghana specifically in this situation, in this conversation, and the choice of these two countries was quite deliberate, because in the debt experience of these two countries, you'll be able to see a lot of what's happening in your country. And allow me to confirm this. Raise your hand if you're from a country that's ever prioritized debt payments over healthcare. Okay, that worked. Raise your hand if you're from a country that has ever had a corruption scandal related to debt. Okay. And raise your hand if your country has ever defaulted or come close to it. Okay. The Kenyans, you're not optimistic. All right. And so we do believe that, by focusing on the case study of Kenya and getting some research and expertise on the experience of Kenya and Ghana, we'll be able to actually pull out some of the insights necessary for moving forward. And more importantly, these two countries do have a lot of lessons on accountability, a lot of lessons to draw on how a focus on some of these governance issues can actually help African nations move forward. And some of the research we've been conducting at Bajeti actually looks at exactly this. And we examined the impact of public debt on social spending in Kenya. And of course, we found that the relationship is negative. So the higher the debt, generally, the less spending in social protection, education, and health. But actually, if you increase the quality of governance, the variables actually become positive. And so debt can actually become an enabler of development and spending in social sectors. And so this conversation, again, will be a conversation about strategies that we can explore to build the accountability structures needed for dealing with our debt crisis. Without further beginning the session, I would like to invite now my panelists. And I'll start with Abdul Karim Mohammed, who is a development economist with over 20 years' experience in public finance and development policy across Africa. He has served in senior roles with Oxfam, the Canadian Parliamentary Centre, the International Budget Partnership, and now coordinates Ghana's Economic Governance Platform, a leading civil society coalition on accountability and public finance management in Ghana. Welcome. Next is Sonia Aima. Sonia Aima is not only a friend, but she is a program officer at the Institute for Social Accountability, TISA. And since joining TISA in 2023, Sonia has played a key role in advancing citizen participation and anti-corruption through innovative accountability mechanisms. She brings a wealth of expertise in coordination and multi-stakeholder in policy and advocacy and multi-stakeholder coordination, with a proven record of designing impactful, people-centered programs. Welcome, Sonia. Last but not least, we have Dennis Omondi, who is the country director of the National Democratic Institute for Kenya, with over 20 years' experience advancing democratic governance across Africa. He's a pioneer in opinion polling in the region and brings expertise in elections, political party development, fiscal integrity, peace building, and civil society strengthening. His leadership spans many countries, including Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Sudan, Ghana, Nigeria, and Ethiopia. A Pan-Africanist in every sense. And is backed by strong foundation in research, program management, and stakeholder engagement. Welcome. Before I begin, everyone on this panel, I want to clarify that everyone on this panel has been invited not only because of the experience, but also because one of the themes of the conference this year is research, right? So developing some of the ideas and evidence for what it is that we'd like to push forward. So each of these institutions has actually conducted a good deal of research in these areas, and we'll be getting right into them. So, Karim, I'll start with you. You are the coordinator of the Economic Governance Platform. Could you explain why the EGP came into existence and what motivated your paper on sustainable debt management in Ghana?
All right. Thank you very much, Cuba, for inviting me to be part of this panel. And we also thank the participants here for choosing to be with us this morning. In terms of how we came to establish the Economic Governance Platform, if you look at Ghana's economic history, I mean, since independence, that's one thing that Ghana touts itself about so much. The first to gain political independence in sub-Saharan Africa. It has been 68 years. Now, out of the 68 years, we've been to the IMF 18 times. Well, government counts 17, but we count 18 because the rapid support that we got from IMF during COVID is usually not counted by the politicians, but we do count it. Now, if you divide the number of years we've been independent by the 18 years, it tells you on average, every 4 years we go back to the IMF because we are unable to manage our own affairs, which is sad because at the time of independence, Kwame Nkrumah declared that the African is capable of managing his own affairs. Alas, we have disappointed Kwame Nkrumah so much. Now, in 2014, 2015, thereabout, Ghana fell into a debt crisis, which was self-inflicted, I must say. The previous president had made a strong commitment to keep within budget. And 2012 was an election year. So he said he was not going to spend beyond the deficit target as been specified in the budget. Unfortunately, the president died while in office, and it was about just 6 months to the election. And so his vice president had to take over. Ironically, he is the current president. So between that time and the election, we emerged from an election with a deficit of 12%, which was far above the target that has been set, which was about 5%. Right? So Ghana, our crisis started from there. Unfortunately, in 2013, 2014, our major commodities were underperforming on the global market. And as you all know, we are price takers. So those volatilities, when they happen, affect us and they influence so much. So here we were, gold was underperforming, cocoa was underperforming, but oil prices were also quite, mid-range. We had started producing oil, but we're not yielding much. Then, unfortunately, just around that same time, the pipelines from Nigeria that bring in gas to power our plants was ripped by some shipwreck. So here we were, cash-strapped, unable to power our power plants, and so we went into a deep power crisis, what locally we call doomsday. And this had a ripple effect of pushing us further and deeper into the economic crisis. Our currency crashed, and we were in total mess. Now, as civil society organizations that have been working on governance and economic issues and all that, when we did, the environmental scan and did close consultation, we were able to identify some allies within government. It was obvious that the government had no other solution but to go to the IMF for a rescue. So our question to ourselves was, look, when we look at the history of our engagement with the IMF, it has been that same colonial structure where, policies are dictated top down. But the question is, how were we going to influence whatever program the government will subscribe to that will put the interests of citizens at the front and center of it? And that is what gave the motivation for this mobilization. And I must give credit to Oxfam for facilitating this. So we mobilized ourselves both locally and also connected on the international front. So we brought together some of the most influential civil society organizations. Here we talk about the Center for Democratic Development, CDD, Africa Center for Energy Policy, IDEG, Institute for Democratic Development, Institute of Economic Affairs, and many others. And what we did was to agree on a 4-point agenda. Now, the first one that we agreed on was that whatever program that the government signs up to must not compromise the interests of the ordinary person who had no role in the economic mess that has been created by politicians. So we have social protection spending that we know become the easy targets for austerity programs. So our first demand was that all social protection programs whatever it takes, must be protected in any IMF program that we will sign up to. Two, we also realize the IMF, in all its engagement, does not see citizens as its clients. It sees government and politicians as its clients. For that matter, whatever decisions are taken, once politicians agree to it, well, even if it is detrimental to the interests of citizens, it will go. But this time around, we were demanding for a seat at the negotiating table. That, yes, the politicians claim to be representing us, but we have seen so many times that whatever they pursue does not inure to our benefit. So we need a seat at the table. The third one was that we have repeatedly gone to the IMF, and if you are a physician and a patient keeps coming to you and you are prescribing the same medicine and they are coming back with the same ailment, then in as much as we may want to blame the patient, you, the doctor, to have questions to answer. So whatever prescriptions that are going to be put forward must be forward-looking, must be transformational. We don't want the same old, prescriptions that focuses mainly on macroeconomic indicators that does not translate into citizens' welfare. It does not translate into employment or anything that citizens can point to benefiting them directly at the micro level. So that was the third point. Then the fourth one, we identified that we have major state enterprises that were hemorrhaging the economy. And these are headed by political appointees all over. So we can talk about the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC. They get big fat allocations. 30% of all oil revenues are allocated to them for amortization of debt and whatever, and development of their capacity and whatnot. But as at the time we were talking about, they had never published even one single financial report. And there are several of them. Cocoa Board, a behemoth of organization that controls the marketing, and everything about cocoa is controlled by them. A lot of money goes in there, but every year after year, they are declaring losses. And there's several of such organizations. So we were demanding that these organizations are made to be more accountable. And also, they take debt with government sovereign guarantees, and when they default, our own scarce resources are used to go rescue them. So we wanted them to be put in order so that it will not be the citizens' burden. And this is how we were able to galvanize ourselves together. So we had a lot of engagements, both locally, then also in DC. We took advantage of the spring and annual meetings, and also in between. First, we identified the most influential members of the executive board and went with our petition in hand, that we know that our government is coming. They have been dragging their feet, but they will come. When they come, these are the key questions we want you to ask them. And this is what we are also demanding from you. So we engage the executive, directors of US, Germany, Japan, China, who else? Quite a number of them, all those influential ones. And the interesting aspect is that the Ghana desk office of the IMF, we are also able to identify some allies who told us, in private, that look, they are all frustrated. Because before the crisis, Ghana was seen as, the poster boy, even if not across Africa, at least in West Africa. And so the mess that we had put ourselves in was also giving them bad publicity, which they themselves wanted to back out of. So they also gave us pointers on what to do, where not to step, and where we can make the most influence. And that is how come we're able to make a lot of inroads. And thank goodness, the eventual program wasn't so much about wanting money from IMF. It was about policy credibility, as government said. So the amount of money we went for actually was less than $1 billion. It was about 975. And out of $975 million, 250 million was ring-fenced in an IMF program for social spending exclusively. So things like school feeding program, We have capitation grant that supports education financing at the basic level. We have national insurance scheme that caters for health needs of the poor. And several of them, in fact, there were 16 of such programs that were to be funded with the 250 million of the program funds that were ring-fenced in the IMF program. And at the time, the managing director of the IMF, Christian Lagarde, commended the Ghanaian civil society for their very active role in influencing the way they do their programming. And that going forward, that is how they are going to shape things. So from there, I mean, we named ourselves the Civil Society Platform on IMF bailout. But subsequent to that, we realized that, look, the issues we are looking at are much broader and goes deeper beyond the IMF. So we subsequently changed our name from the IMF bailout platform to the economic governance platform to encompass a larger scope of work. Thank you.
Thanks, Kareem. I think that's a really elaborate introduction to the EGP, but also shows the power of coalitions and coming together and strategizing. And that leads me to my next question, Sonia, which is Okoa Uchumi is another sort of coalition that also engages on public debt, particularly matters of debt accountability. So could you tell us more about it? And particularly, what are some of the strategies that have been employed by TISA and Okoa Uchumi to further debt accountability? And perhaps also you can touch on our situationship with the IMF.
Thank you, Cuba. I want to welcome all the rest who've joined us now. My name, as said, is Sonia Aima. And I want to start with something that I heard yesterday. And it's from, I think, Dr. Patrick. He spoke about, without the strength in numbers, then we cannot have a conversation. We will always be at the receiving end. And that's the beginning of what we do as TISA with coalitions. One of the things we want to achieve is to collate a huge mass of people who then understand the issues and can advocate beyond just having TISA or Okoa Uchumi as the campaign. When we do beyond Okoa Uchumi and TISA and the organizations represented here as well, then it means that it has gone to the realities of people. Let's take us back to 2023, 2022. I believe the issues of public debt has been a conversation in all our countries beyond even that time, because then we have been borrowing money for a very long time. But then it has become a conversation currently that people are following each and every day. Why that's an important fact is because within Okoa Uchumi, we have been putting out strategies that relate to creating the mass number that I have spoken about, so that we have people beyond us. And one of the key things we are doing is having collaborations and partnerships, both at national level, but also at county level, and even with civil society as well. We have academia who have joined into the coalitions to be able to produce research that is beyond the numbers that we speak about, because they have the link to both the students when you talk about education, but with the societies when you talk about health. So that's one of the things we are doing. Secondly, as we think about this, I want us to also remember the aspect of domestic governance reforms, because then beyond reparations, what's there? I think Lurit and myself were trying to mobilize someone to join the session, and when we told him the session is beyond what is trying to show up? R and L has decided to come, but yes, beyond reparations. And he said there's nothing else beyond reparations but war. So does it mean that we're going to fight forever? For the older generation in the room, aren't you tired? Aren't we tired of these fights and fights and fights? So then it means we need to get more people to be able to join the fight so that we are not the ones carrying the load by ourselves. So let me come back to what you were asking. What are the strategies that we have put in as TISA to be able to carry out the campaign effectively? We continuously speak about debt accountability, which for us just looks at being open, being transparent on what loans you're taking, what is going to be used and how are you going to use it? And before that, then what is the plan for repayment? That is one of the things we are pushing for at TISA. Secondly, as we do a lot of education, someone said in the morning again, the only way we are going to do these reparations is to first educate our citizens. They have to be at a place where they understand what exactly is in it for them, or what are the effects of what we are talking about. Byron yesterday asked someone if we are to go out and speak what we are speaking today in a market, how many people will understand us? So that's breaking the conversation to live realities of people. Then they're able to understand what allocations and budgets and austerity measures are and what it means to them. In 2023, as I was saying, not many people were part of this conversation, but the breaking down of what austerity measures meant in their lives is what brought most of the people out. When we were talking about the finance bill of 2024, majority of the people were coming out because they saw the pads that they buy for their children being at a higher cost. And then they were able to see how then it's going to impact the health sector in the dispensary that they depend on. So then bringing that has also played a very key role for us. Additionally, within the Uchumi, we have numerous people, numerous organizations with different expertise who then bring in the expertise they have. And we have been able to even come up with collective actions in regards to the issues that we want. He spoke about IMF engagements. Over the years, Uchumi as a campaign and its partners have been able to interact with World Bank, IMF, to bring out their petitions on the issues that we believe as a coalition are not things that have to go as. If we were to have, I believe the SGR, there was a petition in regards to that we need debt registers. So these conversations keep going up to bring out the awareness that this is a matter that needs to be discussed. But beyond that, the bottom line is we need an accountable governance. We need domestic accountability in real sense, because then without that, we don't have anything beyond reparations. If they were to compensate us today, do we think our systems are better placed to give affected families? For those of us in Kenya, the Batuk incident of the fire, have we seen the story? The initial money getting to people is about 21,000. And when you get the money, you cannot speak about it. So do we need to take the money or not? So those are conversations that we speak about. Additionally, if you allow, is to also speak about some of the things we do with our counties. Because then as we spoke earlier, the conversations around accountability are not just at national level. Kenya is a devolved system of governance. So then we have counties. And how we work with counties is to ensure they also keep an eye to what we call domestic accountability. Because money trickles down to the county government. We have FLOCA. He's laughing. It means FLOCA is a whole thing. We have FLOCA, and there are sanctions or criteria that have been put into place before any other county can be able to get money from this fund, right? We have one of our county partners who realized in a county called Meru. Majority of us are Kenyans, so mnajua Meru. So he found out that there was a gap in regards to the criteria that had been put. There has to be a ward committee. But the ward committee are just affiliated to the people in power. So then does it bring about the people participation? There was no citizen participation on how the ward committees were elected. And a petition was written. And it went direct to World Bank and not even the county government, because for people to get to the place where they have all this understanding of the things that are not going right, it means they have tried the channels that exist for them to go to World Bank. And at that point, I remember one of the key things we were receiving from this specific civil society actor is that the World Bank had reached out to them to share what evidence do they have. And part of the incident was the money allocation for that specific time was cut until investigations were done. So those are some of the things we are putting in. ensuring that we educate as much people to be able to do this work beyond Uchumi, beyond the organizations that are leading at country level, so that then the conversation does not stick in Nairobi. Before devolution, or before the 47 counties, we were all speaking in Nairobi. And our issues, for someone like me who came from Kisumu, was not coming to Nairobi. It was coming through Baba. Baba is Raila Odinga and his people. And what they were talking about, which is also part of what the GCD is about, the politically exposed persons, these people bring their interest to the front. It's never about us. And it is time as citizens, at TISA we push for social accountability, which is citizens holding duty bearers to account. Without us holding, then we will not put in the pressure that is required to make the systems work. The frameworks we are talking about, reparations, I think for me, living this place, I'm living with what if all these people we are talking about as Africans and the West, if they decide to give us the money, do we have frameworks that are willing, are able to even hold the money and distribute it to the affected people? So that's what our conversation should be. And I remember you spoke about domestic accountability, some of the things that we all need to look out for and be active actors in ensuring that there's domestic accountability in our counties. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. And one of the things I'm getting from the conversation so far is just the multifaceted nature of the efforts that are required to actually achieve domestic accountability on debt. So strategies we've heard from Karim so far on engaging actually directly with external creditors, directly with government, but also directly with citizens and other civil society groups. And I think that's also great. And also hearing about it's not just engagement on the basis of research, basis of strategies that have been explored in the past. And for those of us who are not Kenyan and you're wondering what an SGR is, just picture a chalk white elephant that goes from the capital to the coast, a couple $1 billion. So, Dennis, so NDI has been working in Kenya since the 1990s. And you've been working on issues of fiscal governance, issues of public debt, also a bit around elections. You also published two recent papers or two papers on public debt accountability, one focusing on parliament, one with a political economy analysis, and we'll get into those shortly. But from where you sit, what has fueled this line of work, public debt in Kenya specifically?
Thank you, Cuba, for TISA and Bajeti Hub for convening us here, and really to thank all participants in this session for being available. I want to recognize my colleague, Benedictus Rono, who is also here. She's done a lot in this space and this work, so a lot of the things I will be speaking here should also be credited to her. So we have a motto at the National Democratic Institute, working for democracy and making democracy work. And really, that's really what drives our interventions. So let me start at the global level. At the global level, we look at how our global presence can be very productive in terms of the issues that are affecting individual countries. And then drawing lessons from what is working and then transferring them. And as Cuba says, as we started, we worked with political parties, we worked with government, we worked with parliament, we worked with the judiciary, but we never quite got into institutions of fiscal governance, until 2019 in Kenya, for instance. And so what we have been able to do at the regional level is to try and look at conversations that are happening around public debt and trying to then borrow or influence those things at the global level, but equally drawing lessons for our countries, connecting our civil society to the global networks, and of course the global architects that are available to address some of this. In Kenya, we have published the role of parliament in public debt management, and recently we published the political economy analysis of public debt document from 2010 to 2023, which we'll be speaking about really. But what drove us in Kenya to actually look at this? One is that rising public debt is no longer just an economic governance problem, is a full-blown governance problem. And I think for us situating it as so, then helps us see exactly how the framing works. The second reason is that now more than ever, fiscal governance is at the very center of democratic governance, particularly for most African countries. And of course, for the many reasons you have been hearing, listening to since we came here. But essentially, when we are talking about debt servicing, surpassing basic provisions of goods and services by governments, it is a full-blown governance problem. And I think we have to situate it as so. Thirdly, if you look at the fundamental aspirations of democracies, one of the pillars is meaningful participation of the general citizenry in the decision processes, including, therefore, if we are talking about public debt, how generally is acquired and managed is a public concern. But what we have seen is that the political agency of citizens that needs to be very fundamental has often been bypassed. And so the political leadership who make these decisions, I say that, they are slaying, so to say, because you have fundamentally given them a lot of rights beyond what it is. And so they are living above what they should be living. And they look at citizens as if citizens then no longer matter. And I think we have to situate the democratic concept back to where it should be. Fourthly, so this is what annoyed me. That if you look at the gaps between 2010 to 2023, our public debt grew 7 times over that period. And we consistently, on average, had our economic growth going four times, growing 4 times. I mean, on a typical level, somebody should actually say that there's a problem, and arrest it very fast before we reach the point where we are. I mean, your economy is growing 4 times, your debt is growing 7 times all the time, and you are consistently going on. You can actually see the ship is going to sink, And finally, and one thing that I think is important, the failure in the fiscal governance space is the critical contributor to all these challenges that I think we are having in our country. Whether we are talking about youth unemployment, we need to tie it. Whether we are actually talking about uncontrolled financing of politics, or the role of money in elections and its outcomes, whether we are talking about the perceived general failure of democracies to deliver, and obviously with great ramifications because of, even if you look at protests are simply citizens saying, this democracy is not delivering. You political leadership are not delivering on our needs. And that essentially means then how the economy itself is governed, or the crowding out of the private sector, given the debt situation, the waning trust on institutions, the emergence of state-sanctioned inequality and rise of oligarchy, and of course kleptocratic regimes and persons, economic stagnation, and so forth and so forth. And so you can easily see that, if we don't get this right, how it impacts other levers of the economy needs to be our concern. And if we're actually going to be talking about democratic governance, then we have to situate economic governance, rightly so, as a democratic crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I think that's a really useful context. And one of the things I'm present to is that Kenya and Ghana did not land in this situation by mistake or by accident. And I think it's something that's come across. And so what we actually hope to do in the next few minutes is to go through some of the findings of the research that you've done on how we ended up here. And I'll start with you, Karim. In your paper, and I really enjoyed it as I read through it, you propose some recommendations to or solutions to Ghana's long-standing debt crisis since independence and the different developments that you mentioned. So of these, what are some of the top 3 reforms and perhaps the issues attached to those reforms that you feel could actually deliver the most impact in Ghana based on your research?
Okay. Thank you very much, Cuba. And I think it is very important that we are centering the entire conversation around research-driven kind of advocacy. Because what we found out was that at the heart and center of all these IMF bailouts that we have sought is debt. So we describe it as debt-induced economic crisis that we have had over and over, which has become cyclical. Now, our main motivation for undertaking the research is that these are issues that we have spoken about over time. I mean, a lot of points have been made, but we don't have one body of work that consolidates all these factors and causes that push us into this debt trap over and over again. And that is what actually motivated us to undertake the research. And we set out to do 3 things. The first one was to understand the political economy of debt acquisition and debt accumulation in Ghana. What are the factors? What are the motivating factors? What are the drivers for these debts that we contract every now and then? And are they always in the national interest, or there are other motivating factors? Because we have heard of vulture funds, we have heard of these, predatory, lenders, and all that. So, and in addition to that, we have also observed, you go to bed at 10 p.m., you wake up the following morning, Parliament has passed a loan agreement, something that has been put together by technical experts, both from finance and maybe engineering or whatever, for a road project. Then MPs are given just 2 hours to review and pass. Who is behind? Who is pushing them? Why are such things being fast-tracked? And that's why the political economy analysis was very important. The second pillar was to look at the institutional and legal framework, the mechanisms for managing debt in Ghana. We have passed several laws. Are these laws adequate? Are the institutions enough? Do they have the needed capacity to manage debt, to negotiate these contracts that we subscribe to, and the debts that we go for, whether Eurobond or with other private creditors? Then the third one was debt accountability, the transparency and reporting of debt. Do we have a uniform classification of debt and how we report it that allows for easy tracking of where we are at any point in time? Or it depends on any government who is in power to decide what is classified as national debt and what is not. And the findings, I mean, kindly project the QR code so that everybody will get a copy of the report. But as I said, because of time limits, I'm going to focus on just 3 of them. So one major finding that we found was is around debt classification and reporting. So we had a situation, I mean, I believe you all know that we have gone back to the IMF again. So as we speak, we are in a current IMF program that ends in 2026. And the current crisis, we realized that one of the major problems was what the government determined to be part of national debt or shouldn't be part of. So we had just emerged, as I described, from an energy crisis. And so we have piled up debt. And the government has put measures in place to, liquidate that. So the finance minister at the time said, because it's going to be a one-time payment, it is not going to be classified as part of the national debt. So it was not added. Then the government also undertook a financial sector cleanup. Some banks' capital adequacy was not up to par as the central bank will require of them. And so they embarked on a program to clear some of them from the system. And it cost government a lot because some people who had their money in the banks were going to lose it anyway. So government have to find a way to pay that one back. The minister did not add that one to our national debt. Then we had also contracted a loan. We had an arrangement with China for a 3 billion facility, which they call a barter arrangement, so that we use our bauxite resources in exchange for some infrastructural projects. The government said it was not debt. And the funny thing is, the opposition at the time wrote to the IMF for clarification whether that must be classified as part of our national debt. And the IMF wrote back to say that it was not part of our national debt. But guess what? When the crisis hit and we went for the program, when they did the debt sustainability analysis, the IMF asked the government to put everything in the pot because every debt is a debt, whether barter or whatever. So here we were. The energy sector debt had to be added. The the barter arrangement with China had to be added, and the financial sector cleanup had to be added. You know what happens when you don't add all these to the debt? It gives you a false view of your fiscal space, and you keep borrowing and borrowing. And so whereas government was estimating our debt to be around, let's say, 70-80% debt to GDP ratio, when the debt sustainability analysis was done, we were 105% debt to GDP ratio. And these are the motivating factors for us to do the research, to understand the issues. So having provided a context, 3 things that I'm taking from the recommendation. There are many more. The first one is the debt classification and reporting. As we speak, there's a raging controversy between our accountant general and the auditor general. The auditor general did his work, found out that our debt was overstated by $138 billion in 2023. The accountant general is disputing it. So you see, there is no, these are 2 powerful state institutions who must, there must be some congruence. They should know where the figures are. But there are differences between them. So we are asking for an agreement on what criteria we use to classify what is national debt and what is not, so that there's clarity in reporting, there's transparency, and more accountability. So that is the first one. The second one is we've observed that there is too much fiscal dominance of in terms of the fiscal side by the executive over the central bank. So the autonomy of the central bank is compromised. It's a political capture of a sort, where political interest trumps prudent economic management. So we had a situation where in 2023, our central bank declared a debt, or a net loss of 60 billion Ghanaian cedis. If you divide that by, let's say, 11%, it gives you the dollar equivalent of the loss that was declared by our central bank. So we are asking for a more autonomy for the central bank, so that they can work, they can collaborate, but the fiscal side should not be dictating to the monetary policy authorities. They must know how to exercise their autonomy. Then the third one, which permeates every facet of our economic life, is procurement. If you look at government budgets, the quantum, if you take what we call item 1, that is compensation, going to pay salaries, about 85% to 90% of the remaining all goes into procurement. And it looks like we are running a gig economy where people just create crises and they have to buy or pay for some service. And even as we have a National Procurement Act that requires that we do competitive bidding, most of the time, particularly I can say for the previous government, about 80% of all procurement were sole sourced, which means the procurement process is seriously abused over time. And that is also one of the ways by which the economy is hemorrhaging. We are losing a lot of money through that. I mean, the nation, we have developed what we call the Ghana Electronic Procurement System, which is an online system that all government institutions are supposed to sign up to. You cannot buy or contract any goods or services without publishing your procurement plan, advertising, what do you call it, expression of interest. Everything must be online. And it must be connected to the Ghana Financial Information Management System, GIVMIS, which will also have your budget. So that if the budget does not speak to the procurement plan, you are not allowed to spend. Yet, we have institutions in this country who are paying for goods and services, and it's not on the GIVMIS, neither is it on the GANEPS. So we are asking for strong sanctions regimes for institution heads who are defying these laws so that we can whip them in line. For want of time, these are the three that I will give, but anyone who gets a copy of the report, there is a lot more. At least the first thing you will see in the report is we have summarized the findings and the recommendations in the first 2 pages. So you even if you don't intend reading the entire report, you get what comes out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karim. So now we'll move to some of the research that has been done and was already spoken about by Alex in the opening remarks. About the alternative governance diagnostic report that TISA is working on. In your report, you introduce a concept that I thought was quite interesting, but I'd like to know more about, called the oligarchy of political exposed persons, OPEP. That's the acronym. Could you explain who these persons are? And specifically, how do they contribute to this lack or poor governance? Including the addresses, we can find them.
Because I'm Kenyan and I need to go back home, I might not mention addresses. That's on a very light note. But allow me to start from somewhere. The beginning of all this, why we felt GCD was important. So GCD is Governance and Corruption Diagnostic Assessment. For us, it's an alternative, but it's more of a shadow GCD report. For us at TISA, debt and accountability is a key concern for us. And why debt is important for us, it's because it's not just an abstract thing. It looks at touching daily lives of citizens. One of the key things I say and I believe in is that debt is not just a tool. It is a rights issue. While we might not still get, majority might still not get the aspect of why human rights is completely affected by debt, we believe it's a direct right thing. Secondly, with the fact that it's not an abstract thing, within Okoa we have managed to link these fiscal issues to fiscal justice and also social justice. That's what we mean by human rights. Thirdly, now why GCD? I've said, Alex started by saying that the Kenyan government in October 2024 stated that they needed the assessment to be done. But then we all know our governments. If assessment is to be done, there's always there's something they're looking at achieving with that request that they have put in. And Alex rightfully placed it. Later on, we found out there was another debt that should have been coming, right? So with the GCD, the shadow GCD document or report that we were working on was to show the true picture or a true assessment of what it looked like, what the situation in Kenya looked like, how people's lives were being affected. If we have reports that say debt is improving people's lives, why are we still saying that the lives of the common mwananchi, the common citizen, is not still being touched? The conversations around the difference between economic growth and economic development, those are conversations that we want to bring in, but looking at the person who should benefit from this. You bring in oligarchy. I don't know why you're so perturbed by the word. But I also like the fact that when he was presenting, he mentioned oligarchs, which ideally are people who are very wealthy, and I believe all of us know an oligarch. It's just that it's a word that has been used by France and everyone else. It's coming to us now. And oligarchs are wealthy individuals who have the capacity to circumvent laws to benefit themselves. So then the politically exposed persons comes in. Most people who are affiliated to people within the political sector, and not the politicians who are trying out, the real OG'd politicians. In Kisumu, where I come from in Kenya, our political guru or lord, I will constantly say, is Baba. Baba is Raila, sorry. It has gotten to our heads. He is Baba before he is Raila. But growing up, it was Baba, and then Anyang' Nyong'o, and then who else? These are the people I know as the politically exposed. And then now they are bringing Kinababu, Owino, who are now becoming the real current politically exposed persons. But being affiliated to these people give you some level of privilege that then allows you to grow, both economically, but even in whichever ladder you want. If it's a political ladder, career ladder, but you know the right people. In Kenya, when we want something, we always say, do you know the right person? Right? I don't know if it's the same in Ghana, but in Kenya, even just looking for a government job, you will be told, who do you know? Going to a health facility, who do you know? So that you are able to pass through the line because you came in a bit late. So these are the kinds of people we are trying to bring out as the bedrock of all these problems. The report touches on a report by Ndegwa in 1971 that brings out the relaxation of the conflict of interest bill that allowed persons who were working with government to also do business. So that's public and private sector. And that's the beginning of all of this. Because then if I am the lawmaker, but I am also the one doing business with government, who's benefiting? Who's benefiting? Definitely the lawmaker, because I know all the requirements that have been put in place. We are putting on an open tender. I already know what we want. It's just a call away to call Emily there and say, in that bid of yours, put this and this and this. Ensure it is less by 50 shillings. So then we can be able to see it is within the budget. Because the report is not yet out, I don't want to speak too much into it. But yes, that is what the kind of people we are looking at. These people influence laws. They influence contracts. They are able to define who gets what. We have seen in our country cabros everywhere. Who said we needed cabros over healthcare? I don't know if that's also something that we all think about. Because then who said we need the red and black cabros? We have facilities in our country that are running on low drugs. Literally, people have to go buy drugs at a pharmacist. Remember, the pharmacy is owned by a doctor who's an employee of the government. So these are the people we are talking about. These are the people who we have allowed to be able to mismanage or be at the front of the decision-making table to be able to discuss. So when we are discussing we need money for healthcare, they're also remembering there's a certain person who paid this billion to my campaign that I am required by virtue of an informal contract to support to get back their 1 billion. And then we get contracts of stadiums here and there. Sorry, stadiums just came up, but it wasn't an intention. What other thing? What other thing are we building in Kenya that we have no idea about? What? See, yes, the one, who had the shower one. So, like, we are constantly investing in infrastructure without tying it to how it's going to benefit Sonia. how it's going to benefit my grandma, our parents who rely on these things. Because then if you were to be asked, and I'm glad they said, when he was presenting, he mentioned that there are things that as economists, you can see we're already getting at a very bad state, but we are still continuing. So this is the concept that brings this to play. It allows this. When you look at the reports, at the end of it, when you deep dive on the Ndegwa report, you'll be able to understand how the dynamics of relaxing the conflict of interest bills or guidelines allowed or propagated what we call a state capture. Because then these are the people who are still holding the biggest chunk of the money that we have. They are the ones who own hotels. We have former CS, was it Najib Balal at some point, also had a case on corruption. He was a CS for tourism, right? And he has hotels. So whose interest is he forging first? Is it their own interest or our interests? Because then when we all argue that tourism needs to come to Kenya, we need more tourists in Kenya, we are looking at employment. And the word has gone, but yes, let's focus on employment. He is not looking at employment, he's looking at the money that's coming to the hotel. Because again, if you ask the ones who are employed in those hotels, they're not paid very well. It's normally casuals, and then the higher level are the ones that get paid. Another thing that they are able to influence, he spoke about democracy for us, to work for us. When we have politically exposed persons at the helm of power, it weakens our own democracy because they are the ones who have the money and they dangle it on our faces. So it's, what do we need at this point? While I need healthcare, but they'll be able to give me small monies to forget about my problems at that specific time. Currently in our country, we have very many bills that are being put to muzzle us, both in the civil society, both even just citizens, from speaking up. And it's always when you listen to the people who are backing those bills, forget about the legislators, the citizens amongst us who are backing the bills, there are people who are aligned to these people. So there is something they have been given to push for this, for it to be accepted. A few months ago, I was having a conversation with someone who supports a certain governor. And he was openly saying it's not working. But because he has to go back, it is working. Even if you come to the ground, there's no one who's going to back the fact that this governor does not need a second term. But even them who are doing this, they know quite well. So much of our problems are very linked to the fact that
Sorry, 1 minute.
Okay. Kenya's governance challenges are deep-rooted and interlinked with structural weaknesses like the ones that we have shared, including unchecked fiscal leakages. Corruption is enabled. I think that's the conversation we've had all this time. The aspects of why we are not achieving data accountability is because the structures and frameworks that have been put in place are enabling these vices to continue. And my last point would be, and this is a call for all of us, why it's important for us as civil society to continually sensitize the community, to continually partnering and collaborate to create the research that we are creating that is going to act as evidence to be able to push and advocate for better policies and even convince, because citizens, it's hard to convince them without evidence, without showing them that there's a facility that has been allocated 160 million, but when you go and check, whatever you see is not equivalent to the 160 million. And then ask them, parting shot for all of us, can we as well try to break down the 160 million to the person who we expect to be able to have some power to advocate on their behalf? Because once you leave the stage, someone needs to take it, and they need to take it from a point of them understanding how it affects them and what they could have gotten out of the money that should have reached them. Thanks.
Thanks, Sonia. I think one of the questions I left with is, am I politically exposed? No thanks. But it's definitely food for thought for the fact that these debt crises don't happen in a vacuum. There are systems and structures, both formal and informal, that actually precipitate a lot of these decisions and the outcomes. So we are about to get into a round of questions. So I just wanted to check by hands or comments that you may have, especially given your experience in your country or any of the countries that have been discussed, just to get a sense of how many we have. Okay, so far I see 3. Okay, so we'll get to that in a few minutes, but we'll have some final remarks from Dennis. And so we're talking, so one of the people we've spoken about quite a bit is government, but specifically politicians. And politicians come from somewhere. And in your report, you specifically, on political economy analysis of public debt, you specifically state that political cycles distort fiscal prudence. What do you mean by this? And what do you think the implication could be for reparations in Africa?
Thank you. I want to start by talking about a story. And those who've heard me talking about fiscal governance know my very animated use of the term physician and mortician on the other side, and what morticians do and what physicians do and who is important as a conversation, and then relate it to the institutions that do fiscal accountability, fiscal monitoring, and then you know exactly. But what is very interesting is that among my many friends, I've always had my physician. I don't have a mortician, but my physician, and then suddenly we met a mortician in our group of friends, and so they started arguing who is important among the two. And so I listened with a physical accountability lens, you know, and it was a very interesting conversation which I can relate. Coming back to, I think, in the politics and what it is. So we have left politicians who basically are required in this cycle of and process to play the role of, you know, a mortician, sort of like, this thing is already screwed, and they actually okay the screwing because they say once dead, can't be made alive. You know what I mean? So debt is gotten in this very bad way that people need to be in jail. But when these things are presented to them, they say, hey, this is a dead horse. Don't flog. And it is very continuous in the process. And that brings me to the question I think Cuba is actually asking. The political economy analysis, the report is available on our website, the National Democratic Institute, so you can actually look at it. This report comes out with 7 key findings. And of course, as Cuba states, he got interest in only one finding, which is political cycles distort the fiscal prudence, which I think is very necessary for all of us working in this space to understand. The competing political interests vis-a-vis public interest is the biggest issue that we are actually having in terms of accumulation of public debt. How does this work? Politicians are going out with campaign manifestos, and these manifestos and promises, which is very African, you know what I mean, they don't have sound economic or fiscal considerations at all. They say, we will build the road, but there is nothing behind it how the road will be built, right? The second thing is that the citizens that we are engaging with are often unaware of the relationship between the economic performance, fiscal integrity, and service delivery. Because as the politician says, they take it because they believe the money should be there, right? Our African politicians should be able to milk a stone and actually have us take tea. You know, it is not always. So the contradiction between them, the promises, and what politicians can actually do amidst the lack of sound economic understanding of the promises. So you say we'll do an SGR, but you don't think about how you'll finance the SGR. Then the public are demanding the SGR because you said, and then as a politician, because of the vertical accountability and social contracting, you need to deliver the SGR. And I think that's really one frame that we need to be thinking about. Then public finance is being used to finance elections through the budgets. And that's what brings us to the element of the ease of financing elections through domestic debt, the DD. Why? Most of the multilateral, bilateral debts sometimes are committed to projects. So politicians, the only money that is very quickly available in the budget and then they can access is domestic debt. And that has been fueling the growth of domestic debt because it is an easy thing to touch. And then the accountability mechanisms are very limited. Now, the other thing that you need to look at is what she actually talking about, the rise of oligarchs. And I think the history, I tell people that, you cannot divorce history even when we are talking about economic governance, political governance. If you look at the history of our nations, the origin of oligarchy is pre-colonial and then post-colonial through neo-colonialism. And then how then the power structures and economic structures have been governed by the same political class. The connectedness between the political class and the economic class, they are one thing. So they are actually determining your interest rates you are paying. Because if you are talking about the Monetary Policy Committee, who appoints the people in the Monetary Policy Committee? They're the same people, right? Okay, you are talking about banks that are loaning to governments. Who is actually owning the banks? I don't want to answer. Then you are talking about who is making the laws and the legal frameworks. Who is making them? It's the same group. That intercorrelation sheds the divide between how these policies are citizen responsive and political elite responsive. And I think that's also something that we need to be very aware about. Now, if you look at then, and the final one, who negotiates bilateral debt on our behalf? No, there's nothing like government. I mean, this government is used to actually shield individuals, right? So if you look at it, it is an individual who sits and is negotiating these bilateral loans, and whatever it is in it, you actually don't come, and then you say, as we go the angle of saying, we need transparency, we need the debt register, we need the action point that I think we need to come out of this place. We increasingly, as practitioners, need to take the form of physicians, essentially engaging with the critical budget cycle beyond, the audit. We are saying that we want to participate in the process of debt acquisition, including, therefore, what we needed to fund. And of course, with the enabling legislations, we should actually, help address some of these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis, there with the call for all of us to be physicians as opposed to morticians. We need both. So first, perhaps I can ask for a round of applause for my panelists. And if there's anything they've said that is not covered in the Q&A session that has really touched you, please feel free to reach out to them. And I'm sure they will be able to help you with that. So now we'll go into a brief Q&A session for about the next 10 or so minutes or 15 minutes. We intend to finish the session by 1 so we can go for lunch. I know there were 3 hands. So we can start with, yes, the lady here in the front, the gentleman there at the back. Is there another? Oh, yes, and Shem. So it could be a comment or a question, specifically, hopefully from your experience. Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, my name is Byron Ochola. I work with the Institute for Social Accountability, which is also the convener of the Okoa Uchumi campaign. And I have a comment and also to contribute to the discussion. And my comment starts with the first question you asked around the strategy that has made the campaign very strong and effective to date. And I want to respond to this by acknowledging the partners in the House. One of the strategies that has made the campaign very strong is capitalizing on the strength of each and every partner. And I want to mention this by acknowledging those in the room. The campaign is very strong in public public litigation. So whenever there's a public litigation, you will not find TISA leading the litigation process. You will find Katiba Institute and you will find KHRC leading the process. When it comes to data analysis and shadow budgets, you will not find TISA leading the process. You will find IPF leading the process and the technical partners on that end. When it comes to the political economy analysis, because you cannot talk about beyond reparations without going back to the history and trying to understand where we are coming from, where we are, and where we are headed to. And you find that is the strength that now the NDI brings by looking at now in terms of the political economy analysis and the history. When it comes to budget and linking it now to how it affects health, education, you will find that Bajeti is very strong on that. When it comes to taxation and illicit financial flows, we will not find TISA leading it. You will find the EATGN and the partners leading on that end. And this work cannot be possible without now the partners behind the curtain who give us the resources that we need. And also in this room, we have Oxfam. We have, there are many in this room in Afrodad. So that's what has made the campaign very strong. And now come to the question on the politically exposed persons.
Okay, 1 minute.
Yes. With me are 3 books that we did. One of them, we are looking at the impact of the IMF conditionalities in 2024 at the heat of Gen Z protest. And when we were launching this book, we had politically exposed persons in the room. And these are the people who fund political campaigns. And one thing that when we were trying to raise issues around the IMF, they told us, come slow. Okay? For them, they don't care about the source of fund. What matters is the fund. So if they give you money to fund your political activities, they expect that when you get to the office, return the money. How you return the money, they don't care. What they care is the money. So you can look at it in terms of the tycoons that fund political campaigns. So all in all, thank you so much.
Thanks, Byron. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is
in 2
Okoa
minutes.
from
2 minutes.
Asipis. I'll try and use less than that. At the end of the last session yesterday, there was a point made by Honorable Kanyisile about the electoral systems that we have that we're depending on. Because the question we're having here is the legislative or that oversight role by parliaments. And I read through the political economy analysis that NDI did, and we also did one with TISA. And what you observe is that parliamentarians are removed from these conversations. They are captured in many instances. They also are not able to get the granular information that we require. So is it time to begin to think about challenging the electoral systems that we have? For instance, in my country where parliament has just been paralyzed, it's not going to achieve what we are talking about, to look at things like parliamentary systems that are more responsive, that can be held more accountable. Because we will do a lot more of this political economy analysis, but when we don't change the structural system of that structural electoral system, it will still produce the same thing. People making coalitions that are emboldened to sources of capital that are dark behind. So I was asking that to Dennis, and I think I'd also like to hear the Ghanaian situation as well. Thank you.
Okay. We'll take maybe 2 more. Yes, because of time.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Odokra. I work with Africa Network for Environment and Economic Justice and Need Nigeria. When the panelist from Ghana was speaking, I was just shaking my head because almost everything he's saying still applies to my country, Nigeria, especially the issue of hemorrhaging which are from state-owned institutions. Nigeria has 3 refineries. And a whooping sum of $450 billion was budgeted to fix these refineries from last regime. Up to this moment, none of them produce even 1 liter of petrol. You see, so and it goes like that for all public state-owned enterprises. These the avenues they use to hemorrhage, the country, and that is what civil society organizations have been speaking against. That these institutions must be fixed in order to provide employment and the much needed finance. And the sad part of it is that most of these funds are borrowed funds and they are frittered away. But there is a good practice that, yes, I saw here, the ring fencing of $250 million for social protection. I think that's a very good one. And currently, NIJ and other civil society organizations in Nigeria are also campaigning, advocating for such ring fencing of finance to support and provide social protection. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Perspectives there from Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Lurit Yugosuk. My work in the space is twofold. For governments is to ask them, as such a massive entity bound by a very huge social contract, why are you unable to communicate your day-to-day operations? And for civil society is to really think about scaling the simplification of different outputs that we have in order to boost collective action. So I have 3 questions. The first one goes to Abdul Karim specifically. As you kept speaking, there are certain modalities that you're talking about in the middle of your advocacy that have been very successful in advancing the conversations around debt justice and economic justice. And based on the conversations we've been having over the last couple of days, or rather yesterday, we noticed that almost every African country is going through the same problem. And from where you sit, do you see these modalities as replicable across all African countries, including the ones that may not have entirely picked up this conversation as critical within their spheres? Now, the second question is to Dennis, particularly, and I'm going to engage you as a physician. So we see that there's this thing of compromise going on a lot. Either social protection is getting austerity cuts and mega infrastructure projects are being prioritized even more. Do you think we're ever going to get at a point where we're able to pursue development priorities concurrently in a way that we're not really compensating for one with another? And then for Sonia, I'll give you this as a very interesting example, and it's about language and simplification. So over the year, I've been working a lot around civic listening and listening to what people are saying about the conversation around economic justice. And there's an interesting thing coming up, particularly with reports that are coming from government, Office of the Auditor General, Office of the Controller of Budget, and all these particular items. They've attempted to simplify, they have attempted to translate. But citizens still say that even in the translation and the simplification, there's a lot of technical jargon they're still not interacting with. What then does this mean for advocacy, and how far should simplification go? Thanks.
Thank you, Lurit. Finally, Shem.
Okay, thank you. My name is Shem Joshua. I want to ask a question to Mohamed and Dennis. Mohamed, I know this is the 18th time that Ghana has gone to IMF, one of the countries that have gone to IMF many times. And we know, even as we speak now, there is still a challenge of domestic debt. And I'm just asking myself, because the conversation is on the disadvantages of going to IMF, World Bank, and those which borrow us money without interest rate. And now we're talking about maybe we need to change the strategy and go back to the domestic debt strategies. We know the demerits that come with domestic debt, because the higher a country goes to a domestic debt borrowing, there is, you pull out private investors, and the interest rate will increase. The same applies to Kenya. So maybe it's a question to both of you, Dennis and Mohamed. How do we need to deal with this so that it doesn't look like we are calling for excluding ourselves from borrowing abroad, but borrowing home while we still maintain the same problem? Because it's the same thing that's going to happen. Up to now, you'll realize that over 55% of Africa countries are borrowing domestically. And it's the current problem that we are facing. Not even the international market, but domestic debt. Yeah.
Thanks, Shem. So we have a conundrum. We are left with 4 more minutes. So you have 15 seconds each to. I'm joking. We'll ask for your indulgence for an additional at least 5 minutes. So you have about 2 minutes with your responses and parting shots and thank yous and regards. Thanks.
That's quite an ask. With how many seconds? Lurit's question. We have had this discussion. There was a time I took her challenge and asked her to do one, to give me what a simplified citizen document looks like. And what I can say, it was a good one, because majority of the people who we gave that to quite did understand. It was a simplification of a global fund report by the Auditor General's office. And how far should simplification go? What we believe with how far it should go, it should be able to touch, it should be able to relate to the person. So if you are from a student perspective, then simplified for you should speak to the issues that you deal with every day. If I am in the health sector, simplified for me should give examples that I know every day. We talk about the equipments, medicinal equipment, whether it's the syringes, that's what I relate with every day. So when I see something that speaks to that, it becomes something of interest to me. When we come to the CSO space, we deal with citizens every day. Currently, governance is at the bedrock of everything, and even politics, as it says. In my previous work, we used to say politics is everything. It's the air you breathe, it's the food you eat. It's literally the decision maker of everything you get to interact with every day. So it's understanding your audience. So your simple question, Lurit, it's understanding the audience, the simplified material is meant for, and then simplifying it to meet their needs at that point. I hope that's an answer. My parting shot, as TISA, one of our key approaches aside from research is advocating for social accountability, which then in simple terms means citizen holding government to account. But for social accountability to happen, we need 2 sides. That's both government and we also need citizens. May we live here knowing that for debt accountability to be actionized, we need both government and we also need citizens, who then are the rightful beneficiaries of whatever debt brings to the country. I hope that. And one, as we do this next time, maybe it's also good for us to bring the government to this side to also respond to some of the issues that we have. Even if it means they don't have money, they always say they don't have money. Can we collate and ensure that we have someone from National Treasury of one of the countries to sit here and respond to some of those things? Thank you, Cuba.
Thanks, Sonia. Dennis, roughly 2 minutes.
Thank you. I have a question from Okoa on the political systems. And Okoa, as a researcher, I'm always scared of prognosis without good diagnosis. And I wonder whether that is really the problem. It sounds to me like how African governments are problematizing debt issue as a revenue issue, and then they're increasing tax, and then messing up the whole thing. You know, so I think very accurate diagnosis of where we are, and not quickly running to fixing laws, because that's always what they do to appease everybody, will be a critical thing that we talk. I think we are saying here, and perhaps given even the theme of this conference, a reparative framework, a reparative thinking around some of these issues, beyond just the global, but even at the national level. Because I think we want to leave it at the global, and I've had a lot of conversations, but we need to actually take back the conversation to start thinking about it at the local level. What does it mean? How do we then reform our frameworks to address this oligarchy, kleptocratic networks that continue to actually impede a lot of these things? And rather than just talking about parliamentary presidential systems, I don't think that's where the problem is very historical. The second question that I had, and of course, she joined the physician side. That's better, is a safer one. You asked the balance between development spending as well as debt repayment, and of course then development spending then should actually then also look at allocation to key social aspects of our budgets. And I want to combine it with the question also of Kwara was asking. It looks to me that there are fundamental issues that we need to look at in our societies. The first aspect is to look at access to information on debt, budgets, and all that stuff. I think that's very critical. And of course, in other jurisdictions, this information is not available. And when information is not available, then you can't even engage with what you don't know. The second thing that I think is very useful is actually to talk about accountable representation. We have political representations that are not accountable. And that's the suffering. If they were accountable, they'll be feeling you. And if they are feeling you, then policies should reflect what your interests are. So I think we need to actually invest so much in terms of looking at accountable representation. And I could go on, but finally, the informed political agency of citizens, which almost comes as a construct of the first point I made, because then they must be informed, and we must be informing them. But equally, that information that they have, they must be able then to express it. Therefore, breathing life to what we call social accountability and a vertical accountability, which is what the politician really fears. And unless we do that, I want to end by Shem's question. And I think Shem asked a very important question for me to end with. He's asking us to reflect on the balance between foreign and domestic debt. Now, for my country, our research has actually demonstrated that there's actually no problem with foreign debt. But it is a political tool to deflect your attention from the focus of the oligarchs, that where the real problem is domestic debt. For every shilling a Kenyan spends to finance foreign debt, they spend 5 on domestic debt. And the debt, for those who know, the figures are almost the same. It's about 5.5, 5.6. So essentially, and we have actually to be very alert about the political economy and how politicians are quite savvy at deflecting your attention from the real thing and getting you, as they continue putting their fingers in the cookie jar, they are pointing at fingers of the people they know you generally don't like. Yet they're actually the real crisis that you need to address. But what does it mean for us? I think the liberation, and when I was actually hearing about reparative, I was actually saying that I like learning from the past, but what do I need to do for the future so that there is no repetition? We need to be very focused in terms of reforming our domestic debt frameworks. This is why I'm saying this very quickly, Cuba. In modern societies, we are having service providers, particularly the network providers and so forth, issuing debt to large groups of people at very high interest rates to citizens, right? Is there a way, if governments are responsive, that we could actually use the same frameworks for governments to actually borrow from public? I am sure that all of you who are in these digital platforms will be very happy to get a risk-free, lend to government at risk-free at an interest like the ones they are paying the bondholders It is an investment. It's a risk-free investment. You have your money, you have the 10, 11, 12% that will be sent to your digital platform, and you always receive it, I'm sure. And that's one way that we will reduce the cost of domestic borrowing, and will get our governments actually set themselves free. But it requires us to push and be innovative in terms of the thinking around some of this. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dennis. Over to you, Karim.
All right, thank you very much. So, in terms of your question about whether these modalities are replicable across Africa, given the similarities of our challenge, I would say to a very large extent, yes. But context matters. Context matters a lot. And I'm saying this because if you look at the orientation of a number of civil society organizations across, because of our very negative experience with IMF over the years, ours is, the relationship has not been that of a friendly one. It's quite adversarial. But I think, I mean, our situational analysis told us that, look, until we are able to come up with a different framework for managing our fiscal and monetary situation, we are still we are going to have to deal with the IMF and the World Bank. So what is the most pragmatic way forward? How can we make that engagement more productive? And that is what informed the kind of relationship we have developed with the IMF. And, I mean, the successes that came out from that, we have shared lessons with colleagues across Africa. We have done that with our Kenyan colleagues. Was it last year or two? Sorry, I always get the name wrong. Something Uchumi, what was the name?
Okoa Uchumi.
Okoa Uchumi.
Save the economy.
Yes, I was in Kenya in 2003 to share insights about how we did this, how we developed the kind of relationship we have with the IMF, to the extent that all the Article 4 reviews, they consult our platform. We have a very good relationship with the World Bank. They never undertake their country program framework development without our participation. I mean, you will not believe it that when IMF was developing the current program, they specifically requested our input for the formulation of the program. And we defined the work in 5 thematic areas: the macro-fiscal, agri-food security, social spending, governance and anti-corruption, and which one is the last one? Yeah, and we make specific direct input into it. And so when the program came out, we look at it and we laugh because we can see our footprints all over it. I mean, the progressive aspects of it that ordinarily civil society will look at and be happy with, you could see that. Not just Kenya, we have also shared lessons with colleagues in Zambia, Tunisia, and the rest. So yes, it's replicable if we take it forward. In terms of the challenge about domestic borrowing, Ghana's current situation, we have no choice. But because we've been locked out of the international market. When we defaulted in 2022, nobody was willing to lend to us again because we could not pay our debt any longer, right? So our only option is domestic borrowing. Then also our currency plummeted. It was not doing so well. So it even made our situation even worse. Because if you are going to borrow, it means that you will require a whole lot of cedis to pay back and the right. And so government is resorting to short-term instruments like the treasury bills, 91 days. The maximum is 1 year. Bonds that they are floating. And that is what they are dealing with. But I think the current government has managed so well that the rates have come down significantly. We are now in the teens. I mean, we were close to 30%. That's what government was paying. So it made borrowing, as you said, for the private sector, we were crowded out. It was so expensive. Everybody was lending to government because it's the easiest way to make money. But now I think the situation is changing, and it's also, we have seen improvement in the interest rate. So, and we think that is the way to go. A point was made about Parliament and its oversight. I think it is one of the biggest the weakest link that we find in this whole conversation. We see the attrition rate. We train people to understand how to do this work in parliament, exercise, strong oversight. Then the next election, they are booted out, and you have to do it over and over again. Unfortunately, unlike the parliaments of, let's say, Kenya and Uganda, and I'm saying this because I was within the space. I was working with Parliamentary Center when we supported these parliaments to build this institution, your budget office in Kenya and that of Uganda as well. Unfortunately, we have not been able to do that in Ghana here. We don't have a budget office. It is only recently that they arranged the parliamentary committees. They have created a committee, a parliamentary budget committee, separating it from the budget, the finance committee. That is the little progress that we have made. But the recommendation is that they recruit technocrats, people who understand this stuff. Because, parliamentarians come from all walks of life. It's not everybody who is a financial or economic or whatever expert. And so it shouldn't just, it said the business of governance is too serious to be left to politicians alone. So yes, so we must get some technocrats who will give them the backstopping, do the analysis, so that they are able to challenge the numbers when they come before them. Unfortunately, our Public Accounts Committee has just become, just a show of naming and shaming people without yielding any results. They bring people, but they don't have any prosecutorial powers. So those that politicians wish to prosecute, they will. But most of them get away with it anyway. The last one that I want to talk about in terms of how do we scale this so that the language is also is watered down, synthesized for easy consumption by others. So what we have done at the Economic Governance Platform is to create online tools that simplify some of this information. So for instance, we have developed what we call the debt tracker, an online debt tracker that breaks down the data and the information around our national debt. So if you go onto our website, www.egpghana.org, you will find the debt tracker as one of the tabs. It breaks down, it traces our debt trajectory from 2008 till today. And today, it will be able to give you today's, the amount of national debt we owe today by the last publication of the central bank, giving you what is domestic, what is external, how have we been managing it, and all those information around it. Then, apart from the usual engagement with civil society actors, we are also taking the information to the youth in the schools and in the communities through what we call the debt cafes, where we create atmospheres that are relaxed, but also inviting enough for people to feel comfortable, but talk about very serious national issues. So the debt cafe, we serve tea and coffee, finger foods, and play music. You understand? Then when the people are relaxed, we begin to talk about national debt and how it affects the youth and what we all have to do to contribute to it. Lastly, we also have the IMF bailout dashboard. It's on the same website. That also is a monitoring tool for us to follow what the progress of the IMF bailout implementation. I think that is all on my side.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Karim. Another round of applause for the panelists and also for yourselves.